This, I hope, is another quick video. A friend of mine recommended that I take a look at this as kind of it turns out to be an example of the kind of irrationality I've been talking about in other videos. And this is just, it's not a hit piece. I'm not saying this person is bad. I'm just saying it's an example of the kind of thing I've been talking about, because examples are always helpful. And I knew in the first 30 seconds where this was going, but because I was asked to look at it, I decided I would slog through it and make myself watch it. And it turns out there are some points that I've made before, but I will, it doesn't hurt to reinforce and repeat a little bit. And so let me get started on just some notes that I have on this. And I have it kind of broken down by rough time divisions. Within the first minute, really the first 50 seconds, he says basically that September, the month September, was originally the 7th month of the year, which is true. Years used to begin in the spring, and you can see this in the other month names like October, Oct-8, or Octal. November is the 9th. December, Deca, that root is a valid meaning if you trace that back, Deca, 10. And so the 11th then would be January, and the 12th would be February, and spring, the new year, that was the time of year would be March. So there's no disagreement on whether September is the 7th month. It's what is said after that that's the problem. First of all, it is claimed that there is some connection with the 7th day of the week and the month of September. I don't know of any scholarly connection between those things, and if people are going to abandon all scholarship and prejudge them all as liars or deluded, then they are saying that they don't care what evidence is. And if they don't care, then there's no point in talking to them. That's been my whole point about the irrationality, the solipsism approach that has overtaken the conspiracy world, and why I no longer wish to be a part of that, because of the abandonment, wholesale abandonment of reason. And making word associations is really the biggest issue I have with this video, is ridiculous word associations that just are baseless. And so trying to connect September to the 7th day of the week is just simply fiction. It's a wish to a preconceived conclusion, a foregone conclusion. Around the 50-second mark, it goes on to make more word associations. And for example, it says that we know from the Bible that Satan means adversary, but the video says it has to do with 7, that Satan and 7 are somehow related words. In Greek, especially, they're not. And if you're going to talk about Satan, you're going to talk about the Bible. And so you have to get the Bible's meaning. You can't just make up your own and impose it from other religions or other writings, or pure fiction, picking things out of the air for that matter. The fact is that in the Bible, if you keep it in context, then we know that Satan means adversary, and it has nothing at all to do with the number 7. So now it's possible that I've misunderstood something in the video. I gave it a cursory listen, so apologies in advance if I did so. I'm just saying that this idea is common, even if I misunderstood it in this particular video. And so it needs to be addressed, and I have addressed it before, but I'll do it one more time. So we've seen that there's no connection between Satan and 7, and now we're going on to some of the other things that they've tried to claim in the video. For example, they say that the dragon will be killed by beheading, but that may be something from other religions. It's certainly not from the Bible. The Bible doesn't say that Satan, the dragon, etc., will be killed by beheading. And then this is tried to be tied into the September 23rd sign with the number 7, being September, and the cherry-picked meaning of severed. And I have a link in the description that gives the separate etymologies of 7 and severed. They are not the same root word. They're not the same meaning at all. They have a different range of meanings. And here again, we're looking at English rather than the original Greek of the New Testament, or the Old Testament, the Septuagint, or the Hebrew of the Old Testament, where it just doesn't work. And so there's a connection here that's being made that has no support. So you can go check those links in the description for the etymologies of the two words. And there's no research offered in the video to substantiate the claims of a relationship between the two words in any language. Around the 1 minute 50 mark, we should know the Bible, the Revelation 12 symbol sign of the woman with the stars, etc. That is not Mary. Now, some people will say it's Mary, but if you consider all the details of the Bible, and especially the dreams of Joseph in the Old Testament, where he talks about the sun, moon, and 12 stars, this is Israel. It is not Mary. Mary meaning is coming from the Catholic Church, which I reject wholesale as far as their theology is concerned. I'm not condemning all Catholics. They do some good, but the institution and its theology is very, very bad. And so bad compared to the Bible. Okay, and that's my measuring stick, as I've said before. The woman of Revelation 12, if you actually go and read chapter 12 and look at some of the other videos that have been done or that I reference on Revelation, you can see that this is a sign. And as I've said before, a sign points to something else. It does not point to itself. So it is a sign. It doesn't mean events happen on that day, as I went over the other day. But this woman is not Mary. Just because it's Virgo doesn't make it Mary. Okay? People are mixing context. You can't do that if you hope to be at all rational. And if you're not being rational, then why talk at all? Just make up whatever you want on the spot, and it can change in the next 5 minutes. And in that scenario, the child, as I believe, and it's still quite possible that it could be Jesus, but if you look at the details again carefully, all the details, you'll see that this is the church, the body of Christ. Because Jesus was not snatched up immediately as soon as he was born. The dragon tried to kill Jesus through Herod in the first century. And when, Joseph, Jesus' stepfather, was warned in a dream to take him and Mary to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod that was about to come, we know that Herod went and killed all babies 2 years and younger in the area of Judea, thinking he could wipe out this promised Messiah that the Magi told him about. And that, in a sense, was a snatching, but it was not up to heaven. And so we got to be careful that we don't overlook details that don't match what we're trying to prove. We have to let the text speak first, and the context. As the saying goes, a text without a context is a pretext for a proof text. And a proof text, of course, is just cherry picking. And so we have to know the context, and the context is that this is Israel producing the church. The church came out of Israel. It was birthed from Israel. The first Christians were Jews, and then it spread to the Gentiles. And so what's going on in that scenario, in that sign that John is given within the Revelation itself in chapter 12, is that the church will be snatched up. And the dragon, Satan, the forces of evil, the beast, etc., will go after the rest of her offspring, which is to say other believers not part of the church, and that includes the righteous Jews, the remnant, that will escape at the midpoint of the tribulation to the place prepared for her for a time times half and time, the 3.5 years. Those are the faithful Jews who recognize that God is true and the Bible is true, that there would be an abomination in the temple, and someone declaring themselves God. And when they see this, they're to drop everything and run very literally from Judea to the place prepared for them. These are the remnant faithful Jews. The rest of the Jews will be wiped out. That's what Bible prophecy teaches. And if you want to know what Bible prophecy teaches, you have to ask people who study it, not the critics only. People only look at the critics, or they look at it from some other religion and try to impose their religion on the Bible, which they would never allow to be done in reverse. So the woman is not Mary, it's Israel. The child is not Jesus, but the church. And I know this is disputed, but it seems to me, if everybody else can put forth their opinions as facts, they can't complain about how I word anything. This is my opinion, as I've always said anyway, but I think it's a substantiated opinion, and one that can be backed up with evidence and reason. So we have to be cautious, especially when there's disagreement among scholars of the Bible, that we don't, lean too heavily and derive too much out of one possible interpretation, and that any derivation we get from it should at least have some basis in reason. So, 1 second, sorry. Making a chat. Okay. Also, the video goes on to try to connect Leo, the lion constellation, with Jesus. It has nothing to do, there's no mention of a lion in this symbolism, in this dream, or not dream, sign, this revelation to John. Nothing about the lion in chapter 12. So he's mixing and matching. He's cherry picking. It's what some of us call helicopter theology, where you lift up a bit of text from one context and drop it down into another. You take it up like a helicopter and drop it. And this is going to lead you to error every single time. So, and this is even a problem to get Christians not to do this, let alone non-Christians or anti-Christians who simply want to make up their own religion and try to use the Bible as part of their buffet. And when they do that, then they claim to have the true interpretation, which is nothing could be farther from the truth. So context, again, is everything, as I've said a gazillion times, and there is no lion in Revelation 12, nothing in a part of that sign. Now, there is a lion mentioned elsewhere in a different context in Revelation. Revelation is not all one context. We have the introductory, the prologue in Revelation, and that's chapter 1. In chapters 2 and 3, we have the letters to the churches, that is to say something to do with the church age. Then from chapters 4 through about 20, we have the John is snatched up through an open door, which harks back to the letters to the churches, where there is one church that has said, because you've been faithful to keep my word, I will keep you out of the time of suffering to come upon the whole inhabited world. That's time and place. They are to be kept out of, not kept safe through. And John, this same church is described at the beginning of the letter to them as Jesus is the one who opens the door that no one can shut. And so when John sees the open door and a voice saying, come up here, a voice like a trumpet, this is a clear, in my opinion, depiction of the rapture of the church. It is a type or shadow, is not the rapture itself. John was taken to heaven, but then he had to go back eventually. But the point is, after the church age, there is a rapture of sorts, one way or another, and then the tribulation begins. And it begins with the 24 elders already there. I've gone over who they are. I've gone over who the huge crowd is of the seal judgments, and the fact that the wrath of God begins when the seals are open. And Jesus, the Lamb, is opening the seals, and it is his wrath, as people on earth even admit by the 6th seal. And no one of any prophetic persuasion believes that the church is to suffer the wrath of God. Jesus is God. It's his wrath beginning with the first seal. Therefore, we can't be here for that. So the tribulation has not begun. And anyone outside of the Bible who thinks they know better is extremely arrogant and judgmental and narrow-minded, in my opinion, as I've said before in my other videos. It's time to start calling them out for their hypocrisy and standing up against it whenever we see it. It does come with a cost. You know that. But we have to do it. This is the last hour. And there is a sense of urgency that everybody who is listening at all to the Holy Spirit senses. So going on to the video, and then we're only into the first 2 minutes of this. I think it's a 16, almost 17-minute video. We have more faulty basis correlations between the words sever and seven, and one that tries to extract the word end from the word bend and claim that seven is a cornerstone. This is all pure fiction. They pulled these things out of the thin air. So another is the claim that the words angle and angel are related and symbolize the end of religion. This is all a series of made-up facts that don't even follow. That's a non sequitur in logic. It doesn't follow. They are making connections that can't be made except through pure fiction and wishes. It has nothing to do with truth or facts or anything that's rational in any sense. So angle and angel are not related at all. In fact, in Greek, the word angel is really means messenger. Angelos means messenger, and has nothing to do with angles or ends. Absolutely nothing. So this is word association based on nothing but whim and preference and preconceived conclusions. So, and then he goes on in the video to try to relate it to some kind of turn of the great wheel, which of course is completely unrelated to the Bible. And here again, if these people are just cherry picking their religious ideas and using the Bible as one of the dishes at the buffet, they can do that if they want, but they can't say they know what the Bible really means. They can't do that. Again, 7 has nothing to do with either the word, not only the words sever, but with scepter. These are homonyms in English that have no relation in the original languages. The powers that be did not write it. I'll get to more of that later, as I've done before. 7 is not related to scepter, or, you know, he tries to tie the word scepter to the Leo constellation, the king, the whole king motif, and it's just a mishmash of nonsense. Like, it's just unbelievable. So it's all New Age, including the catchphrase, as above, so below. Like I said, we're still in the first 2 minutes of this video. As above, so below is a classic New Age marker. And that there is one, I think it's the Message Bible, although it does good translation in some places, it absolutely reveals this New Age bias when it says, as above, so below in the Lord's Prayer. Absolute abandonment of every rule of translation when they did that. Oh, and hi everybody in chat. Thanks for coming. I'm always amazed when anybody shows up. And yeah, let me get to the Sabbath thing in a minute. So yeah, I skipped out a bit after that because it's not worth analysis. It's not worth my time. It's not worth anybody's time. It's pure superstition, for lack of a better word. These word associations, it's like, as I've said before, if you have a connect the dots picture, it usually has numbers or letters or some kind of order you're supposed to follow to get the picture the originator of the puzzle intended. But if you connect any dots at all on a whim, say you want to connect every dot that has the number 7 in it, you're going to get scribbles as a result, nonsense. And this is exactly what people are doing. They're trying to connect dots without any regard for rationality or reason or order or anything. They make up their own order, and then they think they've found the truth, the real picture, when only the person who made the picture can tell you what it is. So, and they give you hints, giving you this order, but if you abandon that, then just, you know, nothing matters. Just make up whatever you want to believe, and don't try to defend it because you can't, and don't try to tell other people they're wrong because you can't. There is no standard at that point. So I don't know a better way to describe it as just pure fantasy and solipsism, as I've mentioned before. So, and in the video, they try to connect President Trump as if any American president has zilch to do with Bible prophecy, except as possibly producing the beast of Revelation. But the name, no. It has nothing to do with trumpets in the Bible. Whether they chose him because of that, trying to do their usual misdirection and throwing chaff at people so they chase rabbits, essentially, or like cats chasing a laser dot, as I like to put it. The whole trumpets things is another instance of this ridiculous, baseless word association. Because in the Bible, there's several different contexts of trumpets. The first is in the Old Testament, where you have one trumpet to tell the people of Israel to break camp and another to tell them to leave. That's the last trumpet, tells you to go. That's a connection with the rapture. There are also the trumpets blown on the Feast of Trumpets, and there is a last trump then. But there is also the trumpets of Revelation, which are neither of those other two trumpets. It's a different context. The trumpets of the rapture is a call, a blessing to the people of God, whereas the trumpets of Revelation are judgments of God against the people of the earth, not his church. The 7th is not the last trumpet. It just simply isn't. I have had people years ago try to tell me that, no, chronologically in the Bible, the trumpets of Revelation are the last. There are no trumpets after that. Therefore, that must be the last trumpet. I don't even bother trying to reason with such irrationality. It's an exercise in futility. So this is all more the syncretistic, cherry-picking, buffet approach, irrationality I've been talking about. And when they try to connect the Jewish Feast of Trumpets with some, I don't know where they're getting the spade or Great Mother or the Witch's New Year in that video. This is, again, their syncretism where they just cherry pick things from the Bible like they cherry pick from everything else and try to make some truth out of it when all they're getting is, it's just like if you're trying to bake a cake or something and you just pick random things from your cupboard to throw in a bowl and mix it together and think that you're going to get a real cake, the cake that was really meant. You know, the box was deceiving you, telling you were making angel food cake. It's really devil's food cake, and I can prove it by I just threw some mud and some brown sugar and some shaving cream in a bowl, and I got something else entirely. This is the truth. That's exactly what they're doing. They have no clue what they're doing. They have abandoned the recipe. They think the recipe is evil. And so, you know, what can you do with people like that? This is why I don't watch these kinds of videos. They're a complete, utter waste of time. And this one is, it's thankfully short enough, and I almost made it to the end. I couldn't stomach it anymore toward the end when they get into this ridiculous trying to tie the Bible to some kind of witch's New Year. That's complete irrationality, and I don't do that. It's just astrotheology is something that is being touted in the conspiracy community, being promoted and pushed while the biblical God is pushed out. Christians are not standing up as a group and opposing it. They're going along in the name of some false unity, unequally yoked. They think it's the great thing to do, that we must put aside our differences. Jesus never said put aside our differences. He said he came to divide. He came to turn families against each other. He came to turn, societies upside down. Jesus said that this is what happens with the truth. When you follow him, you will be divided from those who don't. And that truth is more important than unity. Unity is not conformity. Unity is not the highest thing. Peace is not even the highest thing. It's truth. And Jesus is the truth. And so when people try to take the word of God that Jesus supported and affirmed and mix it with other religions, they're not giving you truth. They're not making the angel food cake. They're telling you lies. Of course, at around the 540 mark, they trying to claim in the video that the powers that be wrote the Bible. I've said before, this is obvious by the Bible's condemnation of the powers that be that they did not write it. And then people will say, oh, well, they always play both sides. Well, that's circular reasoning. It's cherry picking. It's what's the particular fallacy? Special pleading. It's also an ad hoc explanation. No matter what you say, no matter what evidence you present, they will say, well, the powers that be are lying. And then other times they'll turn right around and watch a movie and say, oh, the powers that be are telling us the truth now. Based on what? Based on personal preference and nothing more. If the powers that be are telling us the truth in movies and media and news and all these sorts of things, but they're lying to us in the Bible, I don't care how many ways, how many layers of deception you want to think of, the fact is, when you go down that road, you have abandoned all reason, and there's no talking to you. Believe what you want. And that's why I don't go anywhere anymore, because I'm tired of talking to people, trying to bring reason and logic and evidence to people who don't value those things. And they have the right not to value those things, but they don't have the right to tell any Christian that we can't interpret the Bible in a way that they don't like. That even violates their own principle of solipsism, of truth is true for you, and people can have their own truth. Well, then why can't Christians have their own truth? They contradict themselves and expose their hypocrisy at every turn. So, and I don't remember if I think I did put this link in the description about pagan roots of Christianity. Around the 8.5-minute mark in that video, they try to make that connection between Osiris and Jesus. That has been thoroughly debunked. I won't go over that again. I gave the link. It's under the section Pagan Roots of Christianity and Zeitgeist and all that. But overall, the video is just oblivious to the biblical context, and they not only don't know it, they don't care. They don't want to know it. It doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is their personal truth. And as far as weather control goes, here again, we have a principle where what the powers that be do in their many layers of deception is to give the impression that they have more power than they have. This is a time-honored military tactic. I mean, you know, it's like with World War II, for instance, when the U.S. made up a bunch of small-scale rubber tanks and set them on a certain beach to give the impression to the enemy that they were going to attack that beach and that the forces were amassing there. Deception is a big part of war, and if not the major part of war. And when they tell you that they have godlike powers, you can't just swallow that whole. They have a lot of high tech, granted, but we know about it. We know about Project Bluebeam. We know about Tesla. We know about the fact that they sandbag or hold back on technology they have. We know they have sound weapons. They're not able to hide those things. And if they were truly trying to deceive us, they would have never let any of that leak and would have saved it for their opportune moment, which will be at the rapture, in my opinion, when they have to quickly cover for it with a bogus story. And this kind of astrotheological nonsense is exactly what leads people to that point of gullibility. That's what it is. It's gullibility. So when it comes to weather control, yeah, we know they can control it to some extent. That's the asterisk, the fine print. They don't control all of it, and it does not mean that if a true natural disaster happens, that they always did it every time. That's just gullible. It's oversimplistic to the point of naivety. The disasters that God says will happen, such as those in the past, like the flood, will certainly be at God's instigation. But these people won't believe it. Because they don't want to. It comes down to that. They can't prove that the powers that be do everything that happens in the weather. In my opinion, they screw it up all the time. That's why the weather is so nonsensical, is because they don't know what they're doing. They're trying, but they don't think about consequences. Liberal theology never does. That kind of thinking is non-thinking, really. It's a bureaucratic, corporate kind of thinking where nobody considers the consequences. They don't think ahead to what people might do, whether it's layoffs or whatever, like in personal experience with relatives is where, a company lays off a whole section of their company thinking they're going to cut their employee cost. And the employees just simply move over to another department that had openings. And they're like, wow, we didn't think people would do that. We were trying to get rid of those higher priced people who have been here a while and make more money than we think they should, even though we make insane salaries for just sitting in offices and deciding other people's fate. They don't think ahead. And the powers that be are no different. It's like some people have said, who have come out of occult groups, have said, Satan lacks imagination. Satan lacks creativity. That's why they need us. And they need us to be somewhat human enough to help them, because they lack this aspect of our humanity, because only we are made in the image of God. And by the way, I've heard somebody try to argue it was in a YouTube comments that women are not made in the image of God. And I even had to give the person a link to a patriarchal, quote-unquote Christian site that believes that men are favored by God, who says, no, women are also made in the image of God. That's how bad it is, but I don't want to go down that road right now. So back to the video about the weather. The point is that the powers that be fake a lot. They want us to be afraid of them. They want us to give up already. And people think I'm giving up when I say, no, you're fighting at the wrong battlefront. No, what I'm saying is that you have to be realistic and rational and know that this is a spiritual war, and that while we do have individual battles to fight, we are not going to win the war. Only God will win the war. And you want to be on his side, but you still have things to do. We don't sit around on our hands and do nothing just because we're waiting for Jesus to rescue us. It's like someone stranded in a raft at sea with one oar maybe, or a stick that they're beating off the sharks with. You can't do that forever, and the ocean will consume you eventually on your own. You can beat at the sharks, yes, do that, but you have to also hope and realize that someone else needs to rescue you. You're not in a position to do it yourself. That's where mankind is. This is a spiritual war. And while we have our own things to do, and that's going to be for each of us to recognize and not other people to tell us, the fact is that this war is between forces that are much more powerful than we are. We have to understand that, and keep those things in balance, our own actions and the futility of our actions in the long run. Now, that doesn't mean it's like the old illustration of a boy picking up baby turtles that just hatch off the beach and carrying them into the water because the seagulls were coming and eating them. And an adult comes by and says, you know, you can't save them all. It doesn't matter. And the boy said, it matters to the ones I save. And that's what Christians are supposed to do. We're supposed to be salt and light, spread the gospel, teach people about Jesus so that they can, like Jesus said, and I did not make up, and pre-tribbers did not make up, pray to escape all these things. And I know that's not a rapture verse, but the principle is that escape is something Jesus recommends. So we need help. We have to admit that. We have to be realistic and humble enough to admit that. At the same time, we got to do what we can. So, and that's an individual thing. So now the video around the 11-minute mark recognized the eclipse as a sign, what they called an alarm, but somehow they don't recognize the constellation Virgo sign of September 23rd as another sign or alarm. It's not the event, it's a sign. I don't know how they can see one but not the other. The Bible calls it a sign, Revelation 12. And the Bible never says that something happens at the moment of the sign. Signs point to something else. This was a sign. It was not an event. We didn't say anything would happen, as I mentioned yesterday, I think it was. And then the video goes on to try to connect the eclipse with what John the Baptist did, that it was a kind of baptism. What? That's complete, utter hogwash. It's nonsense. It's anti-rationality. That's just pulled from thin air. So around the 12-minute mark, they said that Revelation is the last book because a new book is starting. What? No, it's the last book because it's the last book. It's the end. It connects to Daniel, which is also the end. It's the last book because it was the last one written, 95 AD. It's the last because it's the last. It doesn't have to mean that there's something book to be coming after that the New Agers are going to helpfully provide for us. So, yeah, and yes, good point in the chat that signs sometimes also point back. That's what the sacrificial system of the priesthood of Zadok in Ezekiel 40 and forward is referring to for the millennium. It's not looking forward anymore to the sacrifice that Jesus made for our sins. It's looking back as a commemoration, which is also what the Last Supper is. It's a commemoration of a past event. He said, do this to remember me. So, yeah, signs are signs. They're not events. And when it comes to Revelation, I mean, making up his own reasons for why it's the last book, he can do that if he wants. He just can't say it's the truth. And besides, the sign of Revelation 12 is the middle of the book. It's not the end of the book. So as he kept saying about bad times, yes, bad times are coming, whether anyone likes it or not, whether they want to bury their heads in the sand or not, bad times are coming. This is not fear-mongering. It's a warning any more than seeing a tornado coming or a hurricane is fear-mongering. These storms are real things. There is real danger, and a stupid person ignores them. This is not fear-mongering. The Bible has never been a fear-mongerer. It's been giving us hope in the face of terrible things, bad things that happen. Yes, bad things are already happening. How can anyone say bad things are not going to happen anymore? That's irrational. These signs are the warning of the bad things. And then it goes back into the etymology errors, the word associations, and tries to extract try out of tribulation and connect it. Actually try to connect it to Trinity. There is no connection between Trinity, which means triunity, three that make one, like any three-dimensional object, height, width, and depth. That is a trinity. That is three things. It has nothing to do with trying people or testing them. Tribulation is a Middle English word, and that's all, and it means trouble. The Greek word actually means constriction, oppression, suffering, persecution, a trial. Trial has nothing to do with Trinity. They're different words, different etymologies, and these people who make these loose word associations seem to think that they can take any sound in any language at any time in culture and draw connections between those dots when there's no connections at all. They're just making it up as they go along. So I guess if I had to summarize this video, I would say it's a typical example of irrationality and the abandonment of reason in favor of solipsism. If you know what solipsism is, look it up. I've talked about it before. It's basically just your own truth, which is irrational, and it is hypocritical for people who engage in this sort of thing to say that other people are wrong. It's a judgment they cannot make without calling themselves hypocrites. If you want to know what the Bible says, read it yourself. And if you want to know what Christians believe about their own book, ask Christians. So let me, at the last here, let me stop sharing that screen and get you a different one of a news story that just happened to be today that was put up while I was working on this. Let me find the right screen here. This is Hedge, one of the few sites I still read, quoting Orwell, and it says, people ignore facts that contradict their false beliefs. This is exactly what New Age, solipsism, your own truth, astrotheology does. They ignore anything that contradicts their narrative, their preconceived ideas. And as the highlighted text here says, the more people there are who ignore facts that contradict their beliefs, the likelier a dictatorship will emerge within a given country. So this is from political economic viewpoint, but the philosophy, the logic behind it is applicable to what I've been saying, because these are people who, as with the will of the powers that be, the trap that they've been falling into, these astrotheologists are falling into, is what Orwell warned about too. I suppose they would call him a fearmonger, but no, they don't do that. He warned that if you abandon reason and you accept this irrational solipsism, you will be led into a dictatorship, and this is exactly what the powers that be want. This is their religion. And so this video is a good example, and this article goes on to talk about confirmation bias. Cognitive dissonance is, also the same realm of philosophy here, and it is rampant, causing the public to be easily manipulated, and this includes those who in the conspiracy world think themselves awake. They have only jumped from the frying pan to the fire. So without a measure of truth that goes beyond your own nose, you will be trapped. You will be led astray. You are following the powers that be when you do this. So I don't know how much more I can emphasize these points, that if you want to escape the trap of the powers that be, you must abandon astrotheology and solipsism and go back to sound reasoning and evidence. And the reason people don't do that is because such an approach will lead you to the truth. And as I've said before, people want to seek truth but not find it, because Jesus said he is the truth. And he is the only one who rose from the dead based on evidence, eyewitness testimony, and people who don't like eyewitness testimony and evidence will never agree to this because they want to believe something else. And they think they can find truth by following dots that have no connection and connecting them anyway. And this, they think, will lead them to the truth. It's like, as I said, going into your kitchen, grabbing random items out of the cupboard, throwing them into a bowl and baking it and expect to get a cake out of it. You'll get something. It won't be what you wanted, but they'll even eat the thing and say, yeah, this is delicious. This is what this is what the chefs have been hiding from us all this time, those evil chefs. I don't know. There's just no reasoning with people who abandon reason, and we need to stop wasting our time on people like that. and get back to the business of standing up for Jesus as his ambassadors and representatives in the name we carry, and not be afraid of what happens when you stand up, but expect it. It's going to be bad. It's the price. Jesus said, pick up your cross and carry it. And if you won't pick up your cross, then you're not worthy to follow me. We have an opportunity to at least only suffer virtually and be ostracized. I mean, it's a price to pay, but if you can't pay it, then why are you following Jesus? Because it's what Jesus promised would happen. He said, everyone who follows me will suffer persecution. If you're not suffering persecution on some level, and I hardly think that virtual persecution is anything to cry about, but it's really intimidating. But you have to, as someone once told me while I was giving birth for the first time, push through the pain. You have to go exactly where you don't want to go, and it will cost you. Because the vast majority of the world, even people who seemed at first to be so accepting and tolerant and loving, they have shown by their actions that when you do stand for actual truth, you find out what they're really like. They will hate you for it. And this is to be expected. What isn't to be expected is when fellow Christians pile on with the un-Christians and tell you how bad you are. That's the part that's hard to take. It's the fellow Christians who think they're helping you, like Job's friends who came to commiserate with him, but instead said, oh, you're being attacked, it must be your fault. I've heard those words. No, it wasn't Job's fault. And if you stand for truth, it can only be your fault if it's considered faulty to stand up for truth. You get backlash for doing that from people who think they have the truth, but in fact have only the powers that be religion of solipsism, astrotheology, etc. So, yeah. Here you are. I really hate watching those videos, but it did serve as an example that I could use of something you can point to and try to practice picking out the errors, especially at the beginning, because the later things will build on the earlier things. People normally, even if they're irrational, some have a tendency to lapse into rationality by presenting a foundation that they hold as a given and then building on that foundation. And people get mad at me, I think, because I always aim first at the foundation. I don't try to chop off the branches of the tree first. I cut right at the trunk, the root, the base. And they don't know what I'm talking about because they don't realize the basis of their arguments, what they stem from. As the saying goes, follow the money. I follow the branches down to the roots at the ground and dig it out there. And then people wonder what I'm up to. And it's like, well, I'm not going to waste my time on your branches. Look where they came from. And they don't even realize where they came from. And the root of all falsehood is the abandonment of reason, the denial of evidence, and saying that truth is whatever we want it to be. That is Satan's lie in the Garden of Eden. You will be like gods if you just abandon what God clearly told you and follow me instead. That's Gnosticism, Luciferianism, etc., etc., etc. And they think they can outsmart Satan. They cannot. That's why we Christians have the Holy Spirit to try to keep us from error. And Jesus said that the Comforter would come and he will lead you into all truth. But the problem is we don't follow very well. And that's why Christians disagree a lot. We are human. We're fallible. We're limited. We follow the best we can. And we're been given the Bible and the Holy Spirit to help, but we don't listen. Instead, we listen to people like this video, these astrotheologists who don't know what they're doing, in my opinion. So I think that's all I have to say about that video and astrotheology in general. But you've got to keep your eyes peeled, as Jesus said, be as wise as serpents and cunning as serpents and as innocent as doves. Don't buy into it. Look for the beginning. Like I said, in 30 seconds, I knew what was going on here. I was not surprised by the rest of the video at all, because I know a lie when I see it. And if you keep your nose in the Bible, you will know a lie when you see it, and listen to the Holy Spirit. Okay, and especially understand that fellow Christians will be your worst enemies. In the name of unity with the unbelievers, they will be your worst enemies. They will throw you to the lions because they think it's like the old adage goes about, throwing meat to a wolf or something like that, and in the hopes that it will eat you last. These Christians who are compromising in the name of unity on some conspiracy theory are failing to represent Jesus. They're being lukewarm and putting their faith second to unity and peace with the world. And Jesus said love to the world is hatred toward God. So I know this is what Jesus said. I'm just passing that on. Let me look at the chat just a little bit more. Everybody is quite welcome. I really hated having to watch this video, but it turns out it was worthwhile, if nothing more than a bad example. It's always good to have examples. But like I said, go ahead and watch it yourself if you dare, and see if you can see the red flags. They pop up continually, early and often in this video, and practice looking for those things. Practice looking for what I saw in the first 15 to 30 seconds, because, and it was borne out as the video went on, that this is an abandonment of reason. This is claims made without substantiation. They did not offer any kind of, there's what I would call soundbite theology or soundbite references. They'll give you half a story, half a truth, which is, as we know, more dangerous than a complete lie. It's always truth mixed with error. So don't let the truth parts make you let down your guard for the false parts. Keep your eyes peeled. It's at least serving an example of how to practice discernment. So let me look at the chat some more. Yeah, that is a good point also. It's like when people realize what they would try to put out food for sharks if they were out on the water fishing to try to distract the sharks. And all it did was make them attract sharks. It didn't keep the sharks away from where they wanted to go fishing. Let's see. I changed my name just the other day. As I mentioned at the tail end of the video I did about the sun and moon of my previous video, is that I want to make a clean break with all the past drama and the hit pieces and the mockery of the name knowledge scavenger into knowledge slanderer and things like that. And the bad Christian was mostly to make a point of other Christians who think I'm so bad, just a kind of in your face sort of thing, eat static sort of thing in my last video. And so I said, let's make one more name change. You can change your name on YouTube, but they frown on doing it too often. I've done it pretty often lately, but this is it. I'm going to keep this one. And you can take it two different ways. You can take it as a verb or an adjective, because as an adjective, free describes truth. Truth should be free. And it should be given for free. I've never tried to sell anything that I thought was true. And I don't think anybody should. If you have a truth, give it away. So free truth is free as describing truth. It's an adjective. But it can also be a verb. Free truth. Make it free. Set it free. However you want to take it. It's at least a little more challenging to make fun of. And it's not a name I've ever used anywhere before. So, and it's short. And just a bunch of reasons. It's just like the end of the era of participating in drama and giving people another chance and a 50th chance because you want to think the best about people. But I'm done thinking the best about people. They're going to presume always the worst about me, so I'm going to do that to them. Present company accepted. Let's see. Speaking of unity, all those signs waving people and inviting Sharia law supporters to be their neighbors are in for a surprise. Yes, they are. Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't know there was another bad Christian. I know there was a plural bad Christians that doesn't seem to have an active channel. I'm pretty sure it was plural. I did not see a singular, but yeah, done with that. Yeah, I wanted to keep the doggy icon. One reason is for continuity, because just like for a while when I changed to bad Christian, I had the knowledge scavenger compass up. So to try to help leave a breadcrumb trail for anybody who wasn't mad at me. But I like the doggy picture too. And, you know, what picture would you have for free truth anyway? And that would be recognizable at the very tiny scale that you see here in the chat. It's hard to see very much detail and icons. So I probably will keep that. It's a nice picture. Let's see. Yep. All right. Well, we have our usual single-digit viewers, and I'm fine with that. Too much publicity is a bad thing, and at least these can be used as references whenever you find another one of these new agey astrotheology cherry-picked buffet religious videos that try to connect dots that shouldn't be connected. And by shouldn't, I just don't mean proper or moral. I mean sensible. And there will never be agreement between those who use rationality and those who don't. And this video is a don't. So there you go. Example of how not to think, which according to some people is the way to go. But at the very least, it should be a good case study in looking for red flags and practicing discernment. So yeah, the elite are watching. Maybe they are, who knows? I know everything that is done is watched, so that kind of goes without saying. But again, thanks for coming. I should make myself do housework now that I have more time in my hands, but I wanted to knock this out because quiet house in the morning. Plus, if I do my housework in the afternoon when people come home, they can see, oh yeah, you've been busy all day. If I got them fooled. So anyway, off I go. Thanks for coming. See y'all later.